So what if I told you that you are already consistent and trying to be more consistent isn't the fix that you need? So in this video, I'm going to prove to you that you are already consistent, and I'm going to give you a real fix that's going to solve your consistency problem forever. And I don't say this to be arrogant, but this fix is a reason why consistency is normally the least of my worries. I've been in the gym for 8 years. I've been making YouTube videos for 3 years, and that's with a full-time job. And when I was at university, I never struggled getting myself to study. There have been some things I've tried in the past that I couldn't be consistent with. And so I'm going to use psychology and neuroscience to explain what this difference actually is. The bottom line is inconsistency isn't the character flaw you think it is. In fact, inconsistency can actually be the best thing in the world. All you have to do is dig a little bit deeper than what you're used to. But first, let me prove to you why you're already consistent. Because once we understand this, we can address the real problem here. So if I could snap my fingers and make your screen time a quarter of what it is, would you want me to? Now, I'm willing to guess that you would. And that would tell me two things. The first is you use your phone at every opportunity. So when you're on the couch, when you're in bed, when you're on the toilet, when you're waiting in line. And that's consistency, no? The second thing is that you're doing something you would rather not do. And that's the definition of discipline, isn't it? And I can guess what you're thinking here. You'll be like, whoa, Josh, that isn't the consistency what we're talking about. Like, yeah, I know. But the thing is, you know the difference, but your brain doesn't. And I want to just linger on this for a little moment because this is actually a pretty important detail. So here's an example to illustrate this. Video games can be quite hard. And you don't have any problem playing them. Like you have no problem being consistent with them, even though you can get really angry and really frustrated. And the reason why is pretty obvious because it's just what you want to do. And this is an important detail because what this shows us is that you can do things that you don't want to do and are easy, like doom scrolling. But you can also do things that you want to do and that are hard, like playing video games. Obviously, you can do things that are easy and then you want to do. But it's this area here, isn't it? Things that you don't want to do and that are hard. But just think for a moment. What makes you so sure that this is the right approach anyway? Because I honestly don't think it is the right approach. So what if we can take things that are hard and that we don't want to do and make them into things that we do want to do, like a video game? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. So this here is the consistency problem that you have to solve, and I call it the gap. The gap represents the distance between this current version of yourself and who you want to be. So what I want you to really understand here is that this current version of yourself is doing things consistently that this ideal version of yourself wouldn't do. And it's the same for the opposite. The ideal version of yourself will do things consistently that this current version of yourself would not do. And so the point here is both versions of yourself are consistent. They're just consistent at different things. I know this sounds obvious, right? You have to cross this gap and become this ideal version of yourself. This distance isn't represented by success or results or achievement. It's identity. Because when you have the identity of this ideal version of yourself, you won't want to do what the current version of yourself does. You can think about your identity as this internal image you have of yourself. And your mind wants your actions to always be aligned with this image. So take a bodybuilder, for example. Someone who has the identity of a bodybuilder will have no issue getting themselves into the gym. They'll have no issue eating healthy, nutritious meals consistently. Because if they didn't do that, then their identity is threatened. So this means that there's good news and that there's bad news. The good news is once you have this identity, consistency is going to be way easier. But the bad news is in order to get to that identity, you have to cross this gap. And that means that your new actions are no longer going to be in alignment with this current version of yourself. That means that it has to die, but it doesn't want to die. So it's going to try everything that it can possibly can to keep bringing you back to this known. It's the resistance that you feel. So every thought, feeling, or desire you have, craving that you have, is your current identity trying to pull you back to save itself. And you haven't formed a new identity that pulls you in this direction yet either. And this is what it means to be the unknown. That's what the gap is. It's the unknown. You're no longer in alignment to your current version of yourself, and you haven't built the identity to be something else yet either. So the question becomes, how can we cross this gap? And unfortunately, I think there is only one way, and I think it's something that you don't want to hear. The only way to cross this gap is true desire. And I know this may sound harsh, but I think it's the most truthful thing that anyone can tell you. If you're not consistent, you may think that you want it, but you probably don't. And so we need to ask ourselves some pretty hard questions. Is this something that we actually want? And don't worry, I got you. I have 2 questions that you can ask yourself to work this out. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is it a true desire or an expectation? Because if you don't know what you want, someone else would tell you what you want. You're trained to comply to the expectations of those around you. Expectations from your parents, teachers, and society. Each deciding what you should learn at school, what major you should study, and what career you should choose. There's expectations for how you should look, expectations for how you should be perceived, and expectations for how you should show up in the world. These expectations tell you what you should want. And the reality is that most things that you want are not things that you actually want. They are things that you think you should want. So I'll give you an example. For years, I wanted to be that social, charismatic guy. The life of the party, so to speak. And in order to practice that skill, I made conversations with random people throughout my day. I made an effort to have conversations with the cashiers when I was at the supermarket. I would even approach strangers on the street. I'll make an effort to talk to guys at the gym. And I even went and did something that I really don't like doing, like going to bars and clubs and trying to be social. But I could never make this a consistent habit of mine, no matter what I tried. So eventually I had to ask myself, is this a true desire of mine, or is it an expectation? And Socrates, that philosopher guy from ages ago, he recommended his students ask themselves a series of probing questions to really get to the heart of their beliefs and values and what they actually think. So I'll run you through some of the dialogue that I would have with myself when I'm thinking about this type of stuff now. What do you want? I want to be extroverted. Why do you want to be extroverted? Because extroverts get more attention and respect than introverts. Okay, why do you want attention and respect? Well, because without it, I would feel like a loser. Okay, do you think you're a loser? In the social sense, yes? Right, let me get this straight. You think you need to be extroverted for people to like you? Yeah, I guess so. If you could be well liked and desired without being extroverted, would you still want to be extroverted? No, I wouldn't. What would you rather be instead? Me. So you want to be liked and desired by being yourself. Ideally, yes. So that means that going up to strangers and forcing conversations is not you. No, it's not me. Is it something the best version of yourself would do? No, not necessarily. You'll be able to do it if you wanted to, but it wouldn't be a regular thing. So even in the best possible version of yourself, it's still not something that you want. Yep. Okay, right. So what do you actually want then? Well, I guess I want to be confident, capable of talking to anyone, anywhere, and be comfortable in my own skin. So you're not trying to be the extroverted social guy that's the life of the party. You just want to have some social skills that removes your social anxiety. Yes. Look, I can keep going with the dialogue, but I can probably guess that you get the point. Expectations are not your true desires, and expectations are never going to be enough to get you across that gap, but true desire attached to a big goal that you have will. So the second question I want you guys to ask yourselves is, does my inconsistency feel like a heavy mistake? So a couple of months ago, I quit my engineering job so I can have clear focus on what I actually do want. And that's building this personal brand so that I can do work that I care about and I can live life on my own terms. Big goals like this frame my mind to exactly what I need to do. So every morning I'm at this desk writing ideas. I'm working on these ideas and videos all day long. They're the first thing that I think about in the morning and they're the last thing I think about when I go to sleep. It's actually way easier for me to just do the work than it is for me to procrastinate and ignore the work that I want to do. And that's the secret to consistency. It's just how you want to spend your time. It's what you want to do. And if you honestly have to battle with yourself to go do something, then my friend, you're not going to win. You're not going to make it across that gap. And when you have a big goal like this, these inconsistencies that you do, they honestly begin to feel like really heavy mistakes. It's painful for me to wake up in the morning with a foggy mind because I scrolled on my phone too much the last night. It's painful for me to waste time during the day. It's painful for me to skip workouts that I know I should be hitting. If you truly want to get across this gap, then the pain of being your old self, this current version of yourself, needs to be more painful than being in the unknown. You need to become so disgusted with yourself that getting across this gap is the only option you have. And if you reach that point, you flip the switch, and everything changes overnight. And this is where dopamine comes into the story. So imagine this dot is dopamine. Now, dopamine does not care if what you're doing is good for you or bad for you, if it's hard or easy. All it wants to do is to point you in the direction of your goal. So it can be the cravings that you feel to go back to the old you, or it could be this true desire for you to go and become the new and ideal version of yourself. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the habit loop. So you start off with a trigger, and that gives you a dopamine signal for you to then go do the action. So you experience this as the craving that you feel for your habit. After you do the action, you get a reward, which is partly dopamine. The main role of dopamine in the reward system is to store it for long-term memory, to be like, no, this was actually really good. We love this. We're going to do it again. And that feeds back into the trigger for the next time. So this habit loop can be directed to your current habits, so the things that you don't want to do anymore, or it can be directed to the ideal habits and the new identity you want to form. So your job is to do what you can to direct this habit loop in the direction of the new habits that you want to have. And here's the exact method for you to do just that. So the first thing that we need to do is generate total clarity about the situation that we're in. And total clarity just means that we are completely aware of the consequences of our actions. We totally understand where our life will go if we don't do the things that we need to do. And this becomes what is known as your anti-vision. If I waste all my time, scroll on my phone, eat shit food, and play video games all day, then I won't do what I need to do. And then I'll have to go get another job, a job that I don't want to get. And I can honestly tell you that I do not want that. That is the worst thing in the world right now. Basically, what this means is you need to have something to run away from, and you need to have something to run towards. So you need to become very clear about both. What you don't want in your anti-vision and what you do want in your vision. I recommend grabbing some pen and paper when you have time to do this and really think about it, to actually write down what you don't want and what you do want. Something to keep in mind is your goals are not only defined by what you do want, but they're also defined by what you're willing to give up. And if you're not willing to give up your bad habits to pursue this vision for your future, then I'm sorry to tell you, but you just don't want it enough. So the second step in this method is to build one meaningful project. Don't try to build a business, find a girlfriend, and get jacked all at once. You only have the bandwidth and the capacity to build one thing at a time. That's your project. And the reason why each of these things need to have dedicated time, effort, and attention in order to build. If you spend all your mental resources trying to get your ass into the gym, you're not going to have anything left over to find that girlfriend or to build that business. You'll be completely drained. Not only will you get extremely frustrated with yourself, but you also won't make any progress in anything either, because your focus and attention is just so diluted at that point. Your motivation will tank completely and nothing will change. So you need to approach it this way. The thing to really keep in mind here is building requires so much more energy and focus than maintaining. So once you finish building something, you can drop it down to the maintenance level, and then you can begin building a new project instead. What building actually represents in this case is your new identity. Because remember, once you have this new identity, it becomes way more easier to maintain things. All right, so now we have total clarity on what we're running away from and what we're running towards, and we have a meaningful project that we want to build in order to get to this vision that we have for ourselves. So now the third thing we have to do is close the loop. Okay, so what you need to understand is habits are the repetitions that you have to do in order to get new identities to form so you can cross this gap. But habits are also the thing that keeps the current version of you alive. The way you speak is a learned habit after years of repetition, and you call it your voice. Your behavior patterns are learned habits over years of repetition, and you call it your personality. So our job is, if we want to create a new identity, is to stop feeding the habits that we currently identify with, and to start doing the repetitions for the new habits that we want to build. And so let me first show you what this looks like for the habits that we're going to get rid of. So remember what the brain wants to do. It wants to get its bump of dopamine by closing this loop. And the more dopamine you get, the harder you're going to work in order to close this loop. So if we want to kill bad habits, what we need to do is to prevent the loop from opening in the first place by eliminating the triggers, or if that's unavoidable, because sometimes it is, we need to install as many obstacles or barriers in between us and the action. And if we can do that, it means we stop doing the repetitions to keep this habit alive, and then the old identity of us eventually dies. So to build good habits, we need to close this loop as fast as we can. So we need to get a bump of dopamine in order to give us the motivation to go do the thing, and then we have to get a reward in order to reinforce the behavior to get that trigger again. But there's a problem with this, because the things that we want to be consistent at are normally long-term goals that we want to pursue, right? So that means that the reward that we get for this goal is often delayed many years into the future. And this loop remains open and our consistency dies. Actually, further than that, when it feels like we're not making any progress at all, our motivation tanks, we start getting dopamine to do this thing. If anything, our dopamine signal actually decreases, and that demotivates us. And then consistency becomes even harder. You don't do the repetitions to build the new identity, and it all falls apart. Thankfully, there's a hack called autotelicity. Now, that's the psychological term for an activity that is rewarding by itself. The activity is a reward, and the reward is the activity. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to enjoy the process. So the bodybuilder that we talked about before, who gets a lot of satisfaction from his workouts, won't struggle getting into the gym, but he can still be in pain and discomfort while he's working out. To give another example, a writer who gets satisfaction from writing won't struggle to write, but they can also experience a lot of frustration during the writing process. The thing is, if they end the session feeling intrinsically satisfied, then that loop will close and the habit will be built, and that new identity will slowly be formed. So if there's one takeaway from this video, it's this. What do you actually want? And when you're struggling with consistency, ask yourself, is this actually what I want, or is it an expectation of me? Am I clear about where my life will go if I don't get this sorted? Do I have a singular meaningful project I desperately want to build? Do I find the daily work rewarding in itself? Inconsistency can actually be a gift because it's a sign of misdirection and misalignment. Only a fool will try to be consistent at something they don't actually want. So experiment and iterate until you determine what you truly desire. And at that point, you will want to do the reps to build the habits and to finally build that new identity. And then consistency becomes as natural as walking. And that's all for today, my friends. If you like these ideas and you want them sent directly into your inbox every single week, go check out my Substack and sign up there. Link is in the description. But as always, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.